I'm getting this chair because we are about to go to the scariest place in my house, the attic. I want to show you what sleeping bag I used when I was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro. We had a great conversation in our Slack group. When you book a trip with us, I create a Slack group, and then that's where we talk about the trip, logistics, packing, gear, all sorts of things. And one of the women on the trip asked about sleeping bag and what sleeping bag to take. I'm about to head up here and I'm going to show you what sleeping bag I used. Here we go. I actually haven't been up here in a long time. I need to come up here anyway because I need to get my duffel bag for Iceland because I'm leaving for Iceland in a few days. As you can see, I need to do some organizing. This is the lava gel oven. I reviewed that. Go check out that review. This is the sleeping bag that I used on Kilimanjaro. It's Big Agnes. It's a 15-degree down bag. It's leaking feathers, so I've patched it. I don't know what it's called. I've had it 6 years. I don't think they make it anymore. Yeah, I don't like it. Anyway, that's the sleeping bag that I used, and then the sleeping pad that I used is right here. A Big Agnes Aircore Ultra. I'm gonna grab my duffel. I have some thoughts about sleeping bags and what sleeping bag you may or may not want to take. Okay, so I've showed you what sleeping bag I used when I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. The big question now is, what sleeping bag should you use? I think there's 3 things to think about. First, you should think about what is the sleeping bag that you're already using for camping or backpacking right now, and will it work on Kilimanjaro? Because if you're going to invest in gear for Kilimanjaro, I really think the money should be invested in good footwear. So shoes, socks, boots, and also warm clothing that you can wear on summit night. I took this sleeping bag, my 15-degree down Big Agnes sleeping bag, with me because I already had it. And I didn't want to go and spend money to buy a different sleeping bag just for Kilimanjaro. The second thing to think about is weight. Porters on Kilimanjaro are only authorized to carry 33 pounds. When you hand your duffel bag over to be weighed so that it can go on a porter's back or on a porter's head, it's really important to think about how much weight they're authorized to carry. Plus, when you see porters and how hard they're working to make sure that you are warm, dry, and comfortable and safe on the mountain, I was like, I would rather be that person that has a lighter duffel bag than a heavier duffel bag, because I just wanted to lighten the load for the porters that were working so hard. The third thing to think about is warmth. A lot of guides on Kilimanjaro recommend a 0-degree sleeping bag, but as you saw, I took a 15-degree sleeping bag. And the reason I was comfortable with this is because I knew that the day before our climb, our guides were going to do a gear check. And most guides on Kilimanjaro do a gear check the day before your climb, and they'll go through and they'll look at your socks, they'll look at your boots, they'll look at your shoes, they'll look at your sleeping bag, they'll look at your warm clothing for summit night, they'll check your eye protection and make sure that you have everything that you need. And if they see something that they don't think is good enough to keep you warm on the mountain, then they'll direct you to a little rental room where you can rent or borrow gear for your climb. So I knew that the guides would be checking my gear, and I was prepared to rent a sleeping bag if they said my sleeping bag wasn't good enough. I also like to think about my sleeping bag as part of a system, right? When you're camping and you lay down on the cold ground, your body is actually trying to warm the ground underneath you. So if you just think about your sleeping bag, that's just one tiny part of this overall system. Your sleeping pad, your sleeping bag, and what you're wearing are the main pieces of this puzzle. I knew that on Kilimanjaro, our guides would be providing a foam sleeping pad. And I thought, okay, well, I can bring my own sleeping pad, and then the R value, the insulation value of their sleeping bag plus my sleeping bag combined is going to keep me warmer. Those 2 values add together. If you get cold easily, bring your own sleeping pad, and then you can add it on top of what is already provided, and you'll be warmer and more comfortable. The second thing is the temperature rating of your sleeping bag. And if you head to your local gear shop or an REI or whatever, you'll see a comfort rating, an extreme rating, all of these things. That's just the sleeping bag manufacturer's way to kind of standardize the system that they use to test sleeping bags. I have some thoughts on that. I won't go into sleeping bag rating systems here. Maybe I'll do that in a future video. But yeah, 0-degree bag, 15-degree bag, whatever you have, bring it and see if it'll work. If you have a 15-degree sleeping bag that you really love and you're worried that they're going to make you rent a bag that you don't want to rent, then maybe also think about throwing in a sleeping bag liner, because that will increase the warmth inside of your sleeping bag. I brought along a liner, but I didn't use it. But I did use a sleeping bag liner in Peru because it got really cold in Peru. It's good to think about what you're wearing when you're sleeping too, like base layers that are dry. You don't want to be sweaty or have anything wet go into your sleeping bag with you. I have a pair of socks that I only wear sleeping when I'm camping. Those are my super socks, and I usually put on a beanie. Now, before you get into your sleeping bag, there's a couple things you can do. I like to have a little snack, get something in my belly to fire up that metabolism, maybe a couple sips of warm water or a couple sips of hot tea. Some people go as far as to do a couple of push-ups or burpees before they get into their sleeping bags. I am not that dedicated, and I do not want to do burpees when I'm at home, let alone at 15,000 feet. But the whole point is to just kind of activate that engine, because if you put a cold body into a cold sleeping bag, it's going to take even longer to warm up. You can also ask your guides to maybe put some hot water in your water bottle, and you can hold that against your belly. That always feels amazing. Or put it down by your feet. And speaking of feet, if you're shorter and your sleeping bag has a lot of length to it, it's a good idea to take a hair tie or a buff or a scrunchie or whatever you have, and maybe like block off some of that bottom part of your sleeping bag so that you're not trying to heat with your body this cold part of your sleeping bag. You don't want to waste any energy. On Kilimanjaro, a couple things also happen that might be psychological, but in my mind, they kept us warmer. You'll see that if you look at our videos, our campsites are spread out over a pretty big space, but there's a lot of people on the mountain and a lot of tents. So our guides tend to put our tents really close together. Sometimes there's only a couple of feet between your tent and somebody else's tent. You're quickly going to learn who talks in their sleep and who snores, and that's cool. Just bring earplugs. But I think having the tents consolidated close together actually might keep you a little bit warmer. Plus, you're in these tiny mountaineering tents. There's not a lot of space in these tents, and I think that's intentional because they need to have a low profile because of the wind. And when your body's in that sleeping bag, you're then producing more body heat that's going to keep that tent nice and toasty and warm, so you don't want a lot of extra space. A quick recap here. First, don't go out and buy a new sleeping bag just for Kilimanjaro. Spend your money on footwear, warm clothing for summit night, and if you need a new sleeping bag and want to upgrade, make sure you get a sleeping bag for Kilimanjaro that you're also going to use after your climb. 2, make sure you're packing a light sleeping bag. I forgot to mention this, but that will also come in handy when you're schlepping your luggage from wherever you are to the Kilimanjaro International Airport. So make sure you have a light sleeping bag. Just do it. It'll help the porters out. And 3rd, make sure you have a warm sleep system, not just your sleeping bag, but your system in general. And maybe try that out a couple times camping before you head up to Mount Kilimanjaro. Thanks so much for hanging out with me. Now go check out this video because the YouTube algorithm is smarter than me and it thinks you might like it.